Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Jessica Van Vonderen. Cambell Newman has wasted no time flexing his mandate. Having been handed a massive majority by Queensland voters, the new Premier has set about shaking things up. He's making changes thick and fast as he beds down Queensland's first Conservative government in over a decade. In a moment, we'll speak with the Treasurer, Tim Nicholls, about his plans for Queensland's economy. But first, let's take a look at the LNP's first week in power. Cambell Newman is a man on a mission. He's a man in a hurry.
I'm absolutely excited and enthusiastic about this job.
Week one, Mr Newman installed new faces in the highest ranks of the public service. He convened the biggest party room meeting of any Queensland government before, initiated an audit of the state's finances and unveiled a new cabinet.
We have 5 lawyers, 5 journalists, that concerned me a bit, 1 engineer, that'd be me, a medical specialist, 2 registered nurses, a dentist, a painter and decorator, a financial planner, former NRL referee who usually got his calls right, and an environmental scientist. There's an array of talent.
There've also been meetings with unions about to embark on wage negotiations, and the police service, which will get a boost to its front line. Government spending on advertising and consultancies has been slashed.
We'll be shutting all this down as quickly as we can, as much of it as we can, so we save that money. And we will save a lot of money. We will save a lot of money.
With the predicted 78 seats, there's no doubt Mr Newman has the mandate to get things done. This week, his MPs checked out their new workplace, the Queensland Parliament.
The lifts at Parliament House are the slowest in the city.
The team's excited, perhaps even a little nervous, but the Premier has sounded a note of caution.
The way that we will all conduct ourselves is extremely important. It's about humility. It's about dignity. You are servants of the people of Queensland. You are not here for personal or financial reward. You are to work every single day to make their lives better.
He has particularly high expectations of his ministers.
If that minister doesn't perform, they will go.
Labor knows that feeling. Queenslanders passed their judgment, sending all but 7 ALP members packing.
What we saw was the government had stopped listening to people and people had stopped listening to the government. We need to get back to our basics. Workers' rights, protecting the environment, investment in education. These are core Labor principles, and somewhere along the way, we simply lost our way. Cambell Newman, the new Premier, has made a lot of promises. He has put up there at the top of the list the cost of living. We will make sure that he keeps to these promises and we will make him accountable.
Anastasia Palaszczuk has a big job in front of her.
I wish her the very best.
And we'll hear more from Anastasia Palaszczuk later in the program about the task ahead for Labor. But another person facing big challenges is the new Treasurer. The LNP's self-proclaimed top priorities are to restore the economy, ease the cost of living and cut government waste. Responsibility for that ultimately lies with Tim Nicholls, who this week instigated a commission of audit into Queensland's finances, headed by the Howard Government Treasurer Peter Costello. I spoke with Mr Nicholls earlier. Tim Nicholls, corruption fighter Tony Fitzgerald says the new government has already begun a jobs for the boys gravy train. Is the LNP rewarding its friends with key appointments?
Well, Jess, I also listened to some of the other things Mr Fitzgerald said, and he congratulated the Premier for his stance during the election and prior to the election about openness, accountability and transparency, about having responsible ministers and responsible government. So I understand where Mr Fitzgerald is coming from. I make the point that the people that we've asked to do the jobs are people who are eminently qualified to deliver on those outcomes. That's our criteria. Can they deliver the outcomes that Queenslanders expect?
Those people like Michael Caltabiano, Peter Costello, they also have strong affiliations with the LNP though, don't they?
Well, I think looking at the jobs that those people have been asked to do, they are eminently well qualified to do it. I mean, Peter Costello, Australia's Treasurer, arguably one of the most successful Treasurers in our history, 10 out of 10 surplus budgets, restored the AAA credit rating that had been downgraded twice. He's chairman of the advisory board of the World Bank. He was selected by the Labor Party to be on the board of the Future Fund. I think his qualifications to provide some assistance to us as we chart a course back to a AAA credit rating is well established, and I think that's the criteria we use.
In terms of the public service though, can you say that you will have an independent public service providing frank and fearless advice?
Very much so. That was part of our policy commitments. In fact, on the Wednesday before the election we released our public service policy. We want to hear frank and fearless advice. Frank and fearless advice makes for a better government, and that's better for us and better for Queensland.
Let's talk about your portfolio. The Premier said that ministers who don't perform will be out. Does that make you nervous?
It certainly does. It makes me anxious to do the right job. Cambell and I have worked together in the past in similar roles in the Brisbane City Council. I know what he expects. He expects high standards. He expects us to work every day for Queenslanders to deliver the outcomes, and that's the commitment we've made. We're very aware of the enormous responsibility we've been given. We're keen to get down and deliver to Queenslanders on our commitments.
And you've painted a pretty gloomy picture of the state of Queensland's finances. So under the Premier's edict for ministerial accountability, how long do you give yourself to turn it around?
Well, we're starting to turn it around straight away, appointing a Commission of Audit to have a look at some of the problems, if you like, that have been growing for a long period of time, 20 of the last 22 years under Labor. We're starting to get in there and actually look at what has been going wrong. So we're starting that straight away. On Sunday, the first day that after the election, we issued our, if you like, instructions to the public service to start cutting the advertising. Only on Monday I signed an executive direction to my own department to stop $60,000 worth of advertising. So we're starting right away, cutting travel, cutting consultants and making real inroads into expenses in the government. So we're starting.
When will the budget be back in surplus, and when will Queensland's AAA credit rating be restored?
Well, I think there's a couple of things about that, Jess. One of the issues is you have to ask why a state like Queensland is actually in a deficit situation like it is. We've got the best terms of trade in Australia's history. Our coal exports are booming, and we have to wonder why we're in such a bad state. And that's part of what the Commission of Audit will be looking at. Our plan is to return Queensland to a surplus by 2014-2015. In our costings prior to the election, we indicated we would do a $500 million better job than Labor. That's my target, and I intend to stick to it.
And the AAA credit rating?
The AAA credit rating, as I've said on a number of occasions, will take a longer time to get back. It's not something that can be turned around. It's like the Queen Mary, it takes a fair bit of time. But if you don't start, and if you don't start cutting your expenses and putting in place a plan, you'll never get it back.
What are you aiming for though? Can you give us a year?
I'd like to be able to. I haven't spoken with the ratings agencies yet. I know that the ratings agencies in the past have indicated they want to see signs of a turnaround, and as soon as they start seeing those signs, they start reassessing you. I think that's why our economic blueprint and our Commission of Audit will help us get that AAA credit rating back.
That Commission of Audit that you mentioned that Peter Costello is heading up, it's going to give you some immediate advice but also look at long-term recommendations. Could asset sales be part of that?
Well, I don't want to prejudge what it might say. We've given them a wide set of terms of reference to be able to look at the things that government does, and we'll take on board or we'll listen to what they have to say. Ultimately, the decision will be government, and the government of the day will make that decision.
Is the government of the day open to more asset sales?
Well, as I say, I don't want to prejudge what they might say. What we have made a clear commitment about asset sales is that we will not sell assets without first taking that to the people and asking them what they think about that idea. And that's a very clear commitment that we've made. I think the problem with the last government was the fact that they told people they weren't going to sell assets and then did so, and that really destroyed trust. We're not going to do that. We're going to maintain faith with the electors of Queensland. One
of the other key commitments that you made was to ease the cost of living. So what are you going to do to deal with today's electricity price hike recommendation by the Queensland Competition Authority? Well,
today's draft determination, and we've only had a couple of hours to look at it, I think is a clear signal of the disastrous impact of federal Labor's carbon tax. Without the carbon tax, the average family would be $70 better off under the new rules that have been put in place. So we're going to have a good hard look at that draft determination and what's gone into it. And once we've had a good hard look at it, we'll then be in a better position to make a decision. But I make the point that under the old system that Labor had in place, the bill would have gone up by $330. Under this draft determination, for a typical family, it'll go up by about $120. And if it hadn't have been for the carbon tax, it would have gone down by $70. So there are some significant savings already in place there, but we need to have a good hard look at it and see what we can do to drive it down even further.
Can you override that recommendation?
Well, there are a wide range of powers that we do have as a government to make decisions. We don't want to really use, if you like, the ultimate power and say, no, thou shalt not, without having had a look at it beforehand and making sure we do understand what's gone into it.
Treasurer, thanks for your time.
That's a pleasure, Jess. Thanks for having me.